When we look at powers of 10, what we're talking about is my base is 10, and I have a power or an exponent. An exponent just means repeated multiplication. And if I multiply 10 by 10, or 10 times 10 is 100, times another 10 is 1,000. If I was to take 10 to the 5th power, there's a relationship between the exponent and the number of zeros. 10 to the 5th power means I would have expanded out 5 10s multiplied by each other, which would be a 1, and 5 zeros, which would be 100,000. So the relationship is the power on 10, and it only works for 10. The exponent on 10 tells you how many zeros after the 1. The exponent on 10 tells you how many zeros after the 1. So when we multiply any numbers, whether they be 10 or any other base, what it's going to do is make the number larger. So how do I make a number larger? I'm going to move a decimal to the right. So notice if I have 10, I'm moving my decimal this way and making the number larger. When I divide any numbers, what they do is make the resulting number smaller. How is that going to affect the decimal? It's going to move decimal to the left. Now, decimal has a name, decimal, for a reason. Deci means 10. Decimals work very nice with powers of 10. So, for example, if this is my decimal, we call this first position my ones, the second position my tens, and my third position my hundreds. Going on the other side of the decimal, we call this 1/10. Notice, moving this way, I'm multiplying by 10. Moving this way, I am dividing by 10. And if I divide by a second 10, it's 1 over 100th. And lastly, 1 over 1,000th. So these have the th to it, so this would be the 10th. So we're going to use this to help us multiply by 10 quickly and easily. If I multiply by 10, again, this is called a decimal. Deci means 10. It moves for tens. So if I'm multiplying by 10 to the first, all that is telling me to do is my decimal moves 1, making my number bigger to the right. If I'm multiplying by 100, or 10 squared, it's going to move my decimal 2 places to the right. And if I have power of 3, deci means 10 for each one, it's going to move my decimal 3 places to the right. Now if I'm dividing by 10, that's going to make my number smaller. So this is going to be 0.325. Now I'm going to make 2 smaller, 2 positions smaller. And so that would be 325, and then tenths, hundredths, thousands, 10,000ths. 325 10,000ths. Now I'm going to move my decimal 3 places. So what does it look like when I'm dividing by 10? I could have said, okay, I'm going to divide by 10, and that's the same as multiplying by 1/10. Notice 10 is in the bottom. Well, when I recall about exponents, my exponent here has a square on it, so I'm dividing by 1/100th, or multiplying by 10 to the -2. Determine the position, move it to the top, and it would have a negative power. So we'll be using that here in just a moment. My decimal is located. I want to shortcut this number. So I'm going to write it as 10 to the 3, 6, 9, 10, 11th power. It means I have a 1 and 11 zeros. In this case, I have 10, and let's see, I'm going to have 3, 6, 9 zeros. Looking in this position, that's 1/100th, which is using using exponents, 1 over 10 squared, which exponent rules. So that's just a -2, and we're looking at position because we don't like to write fractions. So we like to include negative exponents in those fractions. So if I look here, it's 3, 4, 5 to get my decimal. So it's 1 over 5, which is 100,000, which is 1 over 10 to the 5th, which is 10 to the -5. So to look at the direction you're moving the decimal, and if it has a negative exponent, you know it's a small number.